This is the Amp Hour Podcast, released March 25th, 2018. Episode 385. An interview with John Davis. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm John Davis of Paul Davis Automation and 3ML, I guess, 3ML LLC.
Welcome, John. How you doing?
Doing all right, man. How are you doing?
Good, good. We just did a live intro there, and that was the first time, so that was scary. But other than that, pretty good. So,
hey, man, sounded good to me. I can't be a critic.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, and you are a regular listener and an old friend from Cleveland. So, welcome to the show.
That's right. And we'll let you back in just one time because you left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I'm one of them. But before we do anything else, let's. So, John, what do you do for a living?
Oh God, do we have enough time to describe that?
I mean, what's the one word thing that I'm looking for here that we have not had on the show yet?
Oh, well, you're probably going to lose all your listeners. Sales.
Sales. I'm gonna try and put like some background alarm, klaxon noises or something like that too. Yeah. So yeah.
I actually have one of those giant dancing things you see at used car lots in the back of my office here. One of the dancing
nice.
guys. Oh, yes, yeah.
That's how you really bring people in,
Yes.
Yeah, so I've known John for a while. You've also taken my course. So John is a salesperson who's also software background, builds his own hardware. So all across the spectrum there. That's why I thought this would be a soft introduction to sales, right? And specifically in industrial sales, right?
Yeah. Industrial automation, specifically mechatronics. There's a buzzword for you.
Yeah, that is a little buzzy. That means robots or just more generic things moving down a production line.
Motion. So it can,
Yep.
Yeah, it can include robots, but we specifically don't get into robots. But yeah, if it moves, it's mechatronics.
Oh, I actually didn't know that classification. That's interesting.
I might be making that up, but it sounds really good. That's how we classify it.
I mean, so whenever I hear mechatronics, it was usually in a university context, and it was basically you're going to do some mechanical stuff, you're going to do some electrical stuff. That's how I always heard it, and I think that moving things in an industrial context would be, that makes sense. So
yeah, and I don't know what the actual definition is. I mean, I think now it's more formalized. I've heard of university programs for it, but yeah. I mean, in our world, it's control theory, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering.
Yeah,
so.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, that's great, man. So, tell us about so obviously you're in the Midwest, and there's a lot of industrial stuff there. What are the kind of industries that you're in and out of every day? I mean, you said motion, but does that mean manufacturing facilities? Are they? Because I think about you could be doing manufacturing. That's the stuff I like, but industrial kind of covers a wide swath of things. It could even be an Amazon package facility. So what are the places that you're normally going into?
Yeah, and when I was thinking of the answer for that, when you were talking there, I was going to say because of the lines we represent, and then I realized that people may not know what I mean when I say that.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Do you want me to? Yeah, do you want me to explain?
Yeah. I've written a post about that a long time ago of the difference between all these things. So, but that was a long time ago, and it's still confusing. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, gotcha. So, and I'll try not to lose all your listeners in this, so I'll keep it very brief. But the company that the company that I own, manufacturers representative, which means we're an outsourced sales organization / field applications engineering firm. And companies come to us. Typically, they're small to mid-size manufacturing companies working in a niche. They come to us, and they use us as their outside salespeople. So when I say the lines that we represent, I mean the manufacturers that we partner with. Our partners, our principals is kind of the jargon that we use. So they're the companies we partner with, and in a defined geographic area, we sell their products for them, and we support them too. That's where the FAE part comes into it. But yeah, so and our company, we have 8 lines we represent. And to answer your other question more directly, these lines span a wide variety of products within a very specific niche. So that niche again is mechatronics. And being Ohio, we have a little bit of everything in terms of industry here. So I'm in everything from aerospace, making aircraft engines, to yogurt manufacturing, and then
nice.
everything in between. Yeah. Yep.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing. I mean, like, well, I've never hid that I love the industrial space just because it is like there's tons of cool problems to solve, and there's it's just usually it is a pretty traditional set of workplaces. Like, you know what I mean? It's not that there's not that much. It needs updates for a lot of things. We'll get into that, I'm sure, too.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. What is so you'd said a manufacturer? Sorry, did you say manufacturer's rep?
Yep, manufacturer's representative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard sales rep and I've heard marketing rep before. So what is? Are you on the sales side?
Yes, or a little bit of both. The lines are blurred now, especially with the internet, in terms of what companies provide. There are companies like mine who provide marketing services, but in a traditional sense, we just stick to the sales side of things.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, like, I did always kind of get confused between the rep stuff, and then there's also like the inside outside sales thing. Like, cause like a company like a big chip company might have a sales rep firm like yours. They might also have a marketing rep firm where people are just kind of getting blasted with emails from outside entity. They might have someone who's calling. That's what, inside sales, or is that outside sales?
Inside sales. Yep.
Okay. And then they have sales staff, or then the distributors then also sometimes do that stuff too. So you're not a distributor, right?
No, we're not a distributor. Distributors, they actually take somebody's money. The big joke that I have is we don't sell anything. So we don't actually take anybody's money. Reps are typically paid on commission for a geographic area. So basically in our area, if somebody somebody buys something from one of the companies we're contracted with, we receive a certain percentage of that.
Okay, that makes sense. And yep. Basically, is that even if they go online? So if I go buy a big motor or something that you rep, is it like even if I go buy it online, you get credit for it, or is that not how it works?
Oh, depends on the contract and depends on the company, but generally, yes. And it also depends on how the company goes to market. I mean, something you said earlier, which we can come back to if you don't want to, or if you're not ready yet. But when people think of sales, and I was the same way before I got into this. They think of sales as like a monolithic thing, like the sales.
Right. Because there's usually like the sales guy or the sales gal, like it's just like
that's right.
Right. It's just the one person that you deal with, but it could be one of many people.
That's right. And it's actually a pretty complicated machine, really, between inside sales and outside sales and sales channel, which it would be your distribution, all that. So anyways, yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting for me too, because it's, at a certain point, you pretty much set up like you have relationships with like individuals, right? You know someone at Yogurt Factory, as that example you gave, right? You know one of the line engineers at Yogurt Factory, and he's basically like, "Look, I got this problem. Can you help me solve it?" And like you're like, "Well, I've got A, B, and C, but maybe not." You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the idea, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's really what we do on a daily basis. It's people. Yeah, I mean, we solve problems. People come to us and say, "Hey, I really need to increase my production of yogurt from 45.5 yogurts per minute to 46.2 yogurts per minute, and I have a budget of $180 million to do it," or whatever. So,
well, hopefully, yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, seriously,
okay.
Right.
So how does that mean? Well, so you come from you do software in the back. You went to school for software, stuff like that. What was your transition into that space? Because I mean, I don't think it's uncommon too that people come out of school with engineering degrees, go into sales, and kind of get into that, but we don't really talk to them here.
Oh man, well, maybe you're first then. Oh geez, how did I get into software? When I was a teenager. Quick history of our company. The company Paul Davis Automation is a family business, and long story short, I've been doing this for about 10 years. Took it over officially about 5 years ago. And, basically my parents were shutting the company down, and then I bought it from them and have started it back up. So it was not my first job out of college. And if you would have asked me when I was a teenager if I wanted to do this for a living, I would have said, hell no. Are you crazy? Do what the old man does? No way. But when I wanted to be a programmer. When I was in high school, one of the engineers who worked for my parents' company at the time was using this thing called Linux, and I had never heard of Linux, and all I knew was it was this scary looking thing that ran on the server, and it ran the company email and file server and all that. And anyway, he left the company, and of course, this was back in, probably 2000, 99, 98, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit earlier.
So not when Linux got a little easier, but
No, yeah, it got easier, by the way.
Yeah, it did actually. I mean, like when you just think about like package management and having the internet connected, that changed a lot of stuff, right? Of like being able to download from repositories, that it wouldn't be where it is today otherwise. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And for this will date it better than my faulty memory, but at the time, we would get updates. It was Red Hat. We would get updates on CD with all the RPMs on it for things to be updated.
It, right? It's either that or floppy disk, right? Yeah.
Hey man, we had a shared 56K modem line. Seriously. But anyways,
kids these days, huh, John?
Oh man, don't get me started. I feel old already. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no. But how did you? I was actually asking how did you take the transition into sales though? Like, this sounds like a standard nerd story. I mean, yeah, but you were the nerd, and then you went into the sales thing, and that's the thing that I'm also interested in your software stuff, but like.
It's linked. I promise. So I went to school for computer science, and thinking that computer science was going to be software engineering, which I didn't even know that term existed at the time. And when I got to school, I remember about my junior year, I had a crisis, and they were learning, like everybody in the class, I remember this vividly, everybody in the class was super stoked about learning how to do some mathematical proof in Haskell. And I'm looking at this thing going, F this, like this is
how about no?
Literally, how about no? Yeah, I cannot think of any practical application for this. And the professor, with this big giant beard and, the type of guy who you think would look like loving to do mathematical proofs in Haskell, he just looks at me and says, "You don't like this, do you?" And I was like, no, I really don't. So I switched majors, and I grabbed onto the thing that I could graduate the soonest with. So that was psychology. So I actually don't have an engineering degree. A psychology degree. Yep. Nice. And then went through a crisis. I didn't know what to do because I thought maybe I wasn't a programmer because I didn't like computer science. Basically raced mountain bikes for a few years, went to work for an advertising agency. And then, I don't know, figured that was going to get me nowhere. So I approached my folks and said, hey, I want to buy the business and take over. And that's it.
Nice. Okay. So what was the transition to sales, though? Like, that's what I'm really wondering. Like, so you had to then go in and fake it? I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, it sounds like you have technical questions coming from your users. So what was that like? And then you're also like, oh, and also pay my salary, commission, whatever, right?
Oh, it was horribly painful. When I went into it, the only sales experience I had was retail, which is a little different.
Like selling jeans to people or what?
No, selling bicycles. Come on, it's like a step up.
Oh, there you go. Well, at least you're gonna get the good discounts, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was selling bikes, so I really had no experience, and I still laugh with my parents today. I'm like, you guys were either I don't know, temporarily insane or just really stupid. And I know that's not the case. They're smart people, but I'm like, why did you agree to do this? This was a horrible idea. This was awful. But it took me about 3 solid years to figure out what the heck I was doing.
Wow. Okay. Just because of the figuring out the billing stuff, or like you mean the actual like how to convince someone to do something and like use you as a provider?
Man, probably everything. I mean, I didn't. I remember asking my dad when he was still working before he retired. I remember asking him at one point. I said, "Dad, how do we make money? This makes no sense. Like, there's,
I like money.
There's all the, yeah, I like money, but how do we make? Like, how does this work?" And to the listeners, I mean, I am sure that I'm not the first person who's thought that. Like, these random salespeople call you up, say we want to meet. They come in, they show you product, they leave, and somehow they're still employed, and they take you to lunch every now and again.
Yeah,
and
right.
The same people So I knew none of that, and I actually didn't like even being called a salesperson. It was kind of embarrassing. Being a technical background, I was like, oh, Oh,
So
but
how do
I've
you
since
make
changed
money?
my mind
Wait
on
a second, don't leave us hanging here.
that. Well,
You still don't know, do you?
I have no idea.
Right.
They send these checks and we just get
Right.
them. Do you want the I guess do you want the aspirational answer and
No, I want
or
the
do you
real
want
answer.
the
Yeah, I want that.
like the nuts and bolts? Okay. Well, honestly, we make money because people see value in what we tell them, and we happen to have products that help them fix issues.
Okay, that sounds like a business answer though still.
Yeah.
I mean, like what's the actual mechanism? Is it like so the term I've heard in the past is registrations. Is that something you have to deal with?
Oh no, thankfully not. No, the nuts and bolts of it is, so say you as a company, Chris Gamble, you place an order. So you put a purchase order in with either a distributor in my territory or with the manufacturer directly. At the end of the month, I get a reconciliation statement that says, all right, Chris Gamble and these other, 500 people placed orders. This was their purchase order amount. Based on the contracts I have with my manufacturers, I get a small percentage of that. I said small because I know there's people out there who are 50%, 90%.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
No. I'm joking. Yeah, we
you
definitely
think
don't do
people?
that.
You're saying
No.
people think that, but it's you're. Oh, I see.
Yeah. No, I wish. So we get a percentage of that. So every month we get that statement and then we start tracking through and we don't get paid until you pay your invoice. So you submit the purchase order. Right. You probably have terms with the company. It's not 30, whatever. 30 days elapses, you pay your invoice, and then 30 days after that, we get paid.
Right. So, I mean, like the closest analogy to me kind of sounds like a Amazon referral type thing, right? It's not a huge amount per transaction, but basically you're getting credit for bouncing people towards a solution that made money for the company. And then instead of like Amazon, in this case, instead of Amazon doing some kind of ad in this case, basically you are the ad in a sort of way, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Cool. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like, and it's cheaper and more likely than ads. Because the thing I always think about is like, how do you reach grumpy industrial person, right? Is like it's tough,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and I'm sure you could speak more to that too, of like how hard it is to reach people and just being there at the right time, like.
Well, yeah, and that's really the core of it. I mean, I know the first answer I gave, it sounds like a businessy type thing, but it's really the truth. I mean, you've been there before. You've been an engineer at a couple companies and one industrial too. Like the last thing that anybody wants is to be bugged by a sales guy, I should say salesperson. Right. I don't want to be bugged by salespeople. I hate salespeople. I am one. So a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis is just trying to figure out like, okay, make sure that people know we have things that could potentially solve tough issues. And when they need us, be there immediately. And when they don't need us, don't bug the crap out of them.
And that sounds right, too. I mean, like, and I was actually really surprised. I was talking to someone out in the Bay Area, too. And he was talking about, like, and this is someone who was doing, large-scale design in the millions of orders of units. And it was even, like, for plastics and stuff like that. Again, this is not the only way it happens, but this is just, it's kind of like, it's just a convenience option at a certain point. It's like, you trust a salesperson, you trust a distributor, whatever. You look what's on their sales card. It's almost like a pre-filter for what for someone that it's not no guarantee that it'll work out, but it's more likely than just like walking down the street in Shenzhen or calling people up down the street in Shenzhen, and like it's just that you're gonna pay a little bit more for it, but it's pre-filtered.
That is a really good way of looking at it. I mean, the thing that I found out that drove me nuts when I first started doing this, because again, I was like this outsider. I didn't like being called a salesperson. I was like, what is this? The thing that drove me nuts is that so much of this is relationship based. By this, I mean sales. But it's true. And
why did that drive you nuts?
So I may not have an engineering degree, but I have been told by maybe my wife and other people that I act like an engineer. So like if I can't quantify something or I can't figure out how it works, it drives me nuts. So and how do you quantify a relationship?
Oh, okay. No, I asked that because I used to get really upset at the whole like, and I think I've said that on the show before, but like that idea of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like that used to just make me so upset at a base level because it's like, well, that's not how it should work. And then, but later on, not only have I taken advantage of that a little bit of just, building out a network, and it's just that everyone's so busy. That's really the base of it, is that people are so busy that it's who is just being able to focus down in a time of stress, it feels like.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about being a pre-filter. I used to think that relationships are like, oh, Chris will buy from Jim because Jim takes Chris out to lunch every week, and like that seems stupid, right? It's inefficient. It's not. They're not. I used to think they're not buying the product because it's the best
It feels
product.
like it used to feel like a kickback, right? It's like, oh, well, they're doing this for that one reason, but that's not. That's just a consequence. It feels like it's not. I mean, people have different feelings about this, but I think it's a consequence personally.
It is, yeah. And what I found out is that yes, it's a consequence, and also, interestingly, even if Jim does take Chris out every week for lunch, Chris may buy from somebody else if that other person is adding better value to Chris.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's the thing. Like that in that example, right? Jim is taking me out to lunch every week, but if he doesn't cover, like the chip vendor that has the solution, then yeah, well, I'm not gonna, if it's a toss up, then maybe, who knows, right? But and hopefully not. But the toss ups aren't really what make companies money, right? Commodity parts don't make companies money. It's like the custom solutions with the higher margin that they want to really sell me anyways.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes that kind of goes along with how things are going in general in engineering nowadays. I mean, the most successful sales organizations I see, and we try to do this too. They're not just showing up and selling something, right? Like, there is no manufacturer out there. None of my customers are saying we are hiring so many engineers we don't know what to do with
exactly.
them. It's gotten down to like there's that one Chris, I see this every day. There's like that one guy, and that one guy is in charge of 50 machines, all of which are falling apart and throwing errors. And
he's
I'm
just
not
trying
exaggerating.
to go on friggin' vacation once a week per year, right?
Seriously, right? Yeah, and what we wind up doing most of the time is, we do a lot of engineering for him or her.
Uh-huh.
They'll and that's a good relationship. I mean, they'll send something off and say, "Hey, I have this rough sketch. Can you please turn it into a design and then a quote, and then just help? Can you just help me with this?"
No, I think that's totally, and that's another thing that's interesting to me. From I would file that under the things they don't tell you in school, right? It's like, you think you go. I went to school personally. I went to school thinking like, oh well, I'm going to make all these custom solutions and I'm gonna get so many like patents, and like, some people do, and that's fine, but like the reality is that a company is not going to hire enough engineers to have someone sitting around and dreaming up the next big thing. They like, most of the time, like my old boss used to say, R&D companies are usually little r, big D, right? So it's a lot of development. It's not as much research. There are some big research companies, but the ones that are doing lots of development, you just need to get an answer. You just need to get out the door. And that's the hard part, in my opinion.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Somebody once asked me why, as a software guy, it drives me nuts that industry still uses ladder logic.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that.
Everything is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, somebody asked me, they said, why do you still use ladder logic? And I said, why we use ladder logic? So that the guy who went to like 3 weeks of technical training can program the multi-million-dollar machine, and you can pick that guy from any technical school in the U.S. And that's also the reason everybody uses Allen Bradley too. But it's that's why there's no technical reason for it. There's nothing. It's just it doesn't matter about the solution or how you get to the solution. It's just if you know it.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Well, maybe we should just get right to ladder logic. What is ladder logic? This is going to be like shifting focus a little away from sales and more into the industrial space, it feels like, but
sure. Yep. Oh boy. Well, let me tell you, son.
Right. Yeah. You know what grinds my gears?
So ladder logic, ladder logic is the best example of what happens when you let a holdover never go away. So back in the day, which predates me significantly, back in the day, industrial control was done using relay logic. So Yeah, imagine like a giant, literally giant control panel full of clickety-clack relays. And these relays were switching. I mean, all the control voltage was usually line voltage as well, which is very safe.
Hey man,
So, you know,
the techs I used to know, they said, yeah, 120 just tickles, you know. Our Aussie and European
quick
friends,
digression.
of course, cannot say that, but yeah, they they don't have 120 there, or they don't use 120.
Hey, my dad worked with a guy at an old it was GM supplier, big one. I can't remember the name of who it was, but either way, let's just say GM. And the guy was a human multimeter. He swore to my dad that he could tell by putting his hand up real close to a bus bar whether or not something was 220 or 480. And my dad's like, yeah, bullshit. He looks at the back of the guy's hand. It's like all calloused, and he tested it, and it was true. Yeah. Anyways, so
if you, to tell 110, you gotta use your tongue, right?
Yeah, exactly. It just tickles. Right. Yep. So ladder logic, imagine you have all these relays in a panel. Ladder logic, if you drew out those relays on a piece of paper and how they interconnect and how they, literally the logic behind the relays, that is ladder logic. If you open up a modern PLC programming environment like Studio 5000 or Siemens people, you have your
tell where John, what side John falls on here, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We're America, Chris.
Right.
Come on,
Right.
Tom Bradley, apple pie. So yeah, if you draw that, that's ladder logic. So if you open up a modern programming environment, it literally is a graphical programming environment that looks exactly like a ladder. It's a ladder. So
you gotta close one before you open another. That's all. That's the rule I remember. Is that right? Or is it open?
Exactly
sorry, open
right,
before
yeah.
close, right? It's open. Yeah, right.
Yes, although like any good IDE, they all hold your hands now.
Right,
thank God.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's interesting. And the thing that boggles my mind about this is this is production facilities. This is like even like the big stuff like car manufacturing, right? I mean, like this is like you have conveyor belts, you have all these things that are just like big industrial machines. It's just switches and like lining things up like that. If someone was doing software like you've done, right, it would be like if statements, right? But that's a little too much to maintain sometimes as well.
Well, it would be a big state machine is what it is. And you can still do, okay, in theory, you can use software design patterns in ladder logic. In practice, you have no idea how much really bad code is running really
right.
important
Yeah,
things.
Exactly.
It is
get yourself in a corner case and you're really, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the simplicity is almost like a feature in some cases, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Sort of,
well,
yes.
yeah, of course. You can't make it super extensible. You can't do all this other stuff. You can't take advantage of modern things, but you can also you can open it up and someone who's done it before can tell pretty easy without telling how your code, style is written, right?
Yeah, and there's been attempts to modernize it, and there's been attempts to move away from it too. I mean, if you really want to, you can program in structured text instead of ladder logic. But I mean, the vast majority of code that's out there is all ladder logic for sure, and a lot of it's running on really old hardware, very ruggedly built hardware.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I've stated before. Like I used to replace. I was working on redesigning hardware that was in the field for 30 years. I mean, at ABB, it was just old stuff, but it was designed to keep going, and it wasn't super fancy either. You know what I mean? It wasn't the needs are a lot less than people think, or that I thought.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I was at a place that makes, you asked earlier what kind of place I go to. I was at a place that makes fiberglass, like the stuff you put in your house. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a great environment for electronics, by the way. Wonderful environment.
Right.
But
well, it is glass. It's insulating, but it's I wouldn't think it's great for breathing, though.
No, the lungs get really upset about that. And they just replaced. Now I'm all self-conscious about my Rockwell leanings here, but they just replaced a Allen Bradley PLC2, and that PLC2, the last time the battery was replaced was 1994. It was made in 1980, I don't know, before I was born, let's say. And
94 was 25 years ago next year. Like that's insane.
Yeah. And this
man, that
thing
makes me feel old. Yeah, right.
this thing weighs like it's a 60-pound chassis with like 16 gauge steel as the case on it, and it's all 120 volt, and it's all through hole components. And like, we didn't replace it because it died. We replaced it because AB is trying to get us to replace these because they don't want to support them anymore. So the price, unit price on them is astronomically high, and that's the only reason they took it out.
Yeah. Using market conditions to force upgrades.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's crazy. Well, let's talk about upgrading again in the industrial space. I mean, can you kind of explain? John, can you just explain all of industrial? That's kind of a big task. But we were talking before the show too of like they are trying to modernize stuff, and there's like all of these quasi new communication mechanisms and all that stuff. Like, what are you seeing in the industrial world these days that's exciting, that needs to be fixed still? Like, what are you seeing that's out there?
Oh man. Well, as you know, anybody who looks at the news nowadays, they know that automation is key, which happens to be great for us because that's literally our name. But yeah, I mean the big thing. Okay, if there's, I'm assuming that people listening, they probably don't have a huge amount of firsthand experience with manufacturing in the U.S. or manufacturing in any first world country for that matter, at least like really hands-on. We still do manufacture a lot of stuff here. Not all manufacturing has gone to a lower cost place. So
especially like big heavy stuff too, right? Because that transportation costs go crazy. And
Yep. And as it turns out, I mean, you guys know this, you talk about it all the time on the show, it is really hard to manufacture some things, and you got to have it close by so you can do quality control and all that. Right. And the only way to be competitive in manufacturing here or in Germany, which is another high cost area,
which is I mean, they're killing it lately. I mean, they've just been like, their surpluses are through the roof. And,
they're doing a great job. The only way to manufacture efficiently is to have a huge amount of output and automate like crazy. I mean, that's what you got to do. And so we're trying to catch up with that. Industry knows it's behind. They're trying to catch up with that too. But the kind of the tenuous relationship, I guess, between progress and industry is that if you're in software, if you're doing, let's say you're building like a website or something, right? If you make a mistake and the website goes down for an hour, it's like really not that big of a deal, unless you're somebody really big like Amazon or whatever. And even then, it's
sure.
I mean, there are
well, it hits your bottom line, but it doesn't break anything,
you see where I'm going with this. Like
yes, I do.
There is
we're gonna talk about steel.
Oh yeah. Well, steel, automotive, any of that stuff. I mean, I was at a place, and I remember this number well because when they told it to me after I picked my jaw up off the floor, I was like, you guys got to be pulling my chain. Like, there's no way. I was at a place, a big manufacturing automotive place, and they told me that per minute of downtime, it was $7,500 per minute. Yeah. So when
okay.
Yeah. Well, the way that they run, if this line goes down, they literally send the plant home, and there's 2,200 people at this plant. So if this line goes down, 2,200 people go home, and they stop production. Period. So
like for the day,
until it comes back up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they still get paid?
Yeah, they probably still get paid, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like union too, right? I mean, like, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so...
I was just doing the math too. That's $450,000 an hour. That's insane.
Oh, it's nuts, right?
Okay.
So, the kind of the pull between it, when you hear about, IoT and even simple things like networking machines so they're faster, industry just moves slowly because the consequences of making a mistake are huge. Like,
right.
Mark Zuckerberg says, move fast and break things. No. You don't want to do that in industry. But on you still have to progress, and you have to, or else.
Is that Zuckerberg? I don't think that was Zuckerberg. I think that was someone else.
I don't know.
But yeah, I understand the,
yep.
Just to cut off the, the commenters. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good point too, because like it almost feels like a cash flow thing as much as anything else, right? Like all the maintenance activities that I've ever been involved with in the like industrial facilities I was at, they were always at night. you know, like, or you had multiple lines, and then you did have that restriction of like if you went from 2 lines down to one because you were upgrading one of them, and then you know, then if your one line goes down, now you're really screwed, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, that there are high costs of switching.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, again, I was naive when I started this, but you kind of assume like, oh man, like this is I'm always going to have hamburger buns. Like I've been to a giant hamburger bun factory because you got to make them someplace, and you know, I think you're always going to have hamburger buns. And you go to the hamburger bun place, and you ask them, how many hamburger buns do you make? And they say, well, we make, you know, I'm not exaggerating, 1 million hamburger buns a day. Oh, okay. Like what percentage of like the U.S. you know daily consumption of hamburger buns is that? And they're like, well, you know, for the region, because you can only ship them so far, that's, you know, X and X
Right,
percent. So
yeah.
you think about it, you're like, okay, so if your production goes down, like we'll run out of hamburger buns in like 3 days. Like,
Oh yeah, like the whole just-in-time,
oh
like
yeah,
Kanban
yeah.
type stuff, like all that Toyota production system stuff too, right?
Oh yeah, yep. So it's just crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah, the scale of it, and it's just nuts. But they are trying to
How
modernize.
am I gonna eat hamburgers, John? Come on, I could like I need to. This isn't gonna work.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and I think you're right too. Like that's the stuff that I feel like that's the stuff that's invisible. Like the things that I always think about for industrial. I knew someone who was doing like canning factories, I suppose. You know, it was like tin cans, putting like foodstuffs into those insulated tin cans that get, you know, labeled and everything like that. Like that's a huge business that I never thought about, but only because I had a family friend who did that. Or like like just generally food. I always think about shampoo production too. Like, I mean, like I know that like chemical production is its own kind of mega industry, but then like even just the putting it into bottles and shipping it out and all that stuff, like there's just a ton of stuff that consumables happen every day, and it's usually within a certain area because there's so many people needing it throughout the world, throughout the states even.
Yeah, that's
So
right. And actually, you know, if anybody out there is looking for career employment and all that, I'll tell you what, keep an eye out for manufacturing engineering jobs, controls engineers, electrical engineers, all that stuff, because I mean, nobody looks at Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, Indiana, Western Pennsylvania and says, I want to move there. That's the best place, right? But, you know, the starting salaries that I hear, because nobody can find anyone. Everybody, it seems, is rushing to the sexier jobs and locations. And I mean, for the amount of money they're offering, that's a great living in Cleveland, Ohio, let me tell you. So, yeah.
yeah, right. I
Pro
mean,
tip.
like, and I lived in Cleveland for 15 years. Like I did move, but like I like Cleveland too. Like there's some good stuff there and good people there. So yeah. Yeah, and like you're saying, I think the other crazy thing is that thing that I always talk about on the show is there's this wave of people that are getting ready to retire. They're not quite there yet. They're, you know, the grizzled old, you know, plant guy anyways. Like he's probably going to work as long as he can just cuz that's his MO, but eventually he's going to retire, and there's a lot of them in the baby boomers. Maybe you could talk about the general persona that you encounter on a daily basis.
Are you grumpy? Do you like coffee?
Yeah.
Well,
You're right.
Then I have the job for you.
You have a mustache.
Do you have a mustache? Yeah.
Right.
No, it's true. Like, you know, there are not a lot of people going into these jobs, and in terms of personas, you know, most of the people that I deal with are probably in their 50s. Probably the youngest would be late 40s. So, you know, there's a lot to be done there. And from an engineering perspective, well, I'm going to put fun in scare quotes, because when you get a phone call at 4 a.m, that's not fun. But
right. Lying down is never fun, right?
No, yeah. But I mean, the stuff you get to work
But on
on.
a good day, when you get to upgrade things, you think about upgrading things, you have budget to upgrade things. That's not bad.
Oh
right?
man, yeah. And there is nothing will put a smile on your face more than hitting a button that makes something big happen, like an arc strike or a you know, whatever, or a Presco. That stuff's awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Right. There's a story. Sam, one of the guys who used to write for me for engineer blogs.
Yeah.
He has a post about the reason he made this big red button light switch, and it was a story about him like being at a factory, and the lady looks at him and she says, "Do you want to push the button?" He's like, "Yeah." "How'd you know?" And she goes, all the little boys want to push the button. Yeah, well, you know, what do you?
It is.
I don't know if it's derogatory or not, but if I was staring at a button panel, it's like, yeah, I want to push the button there. You know, like that's great.
It is so true. There's nothing more satisfying than hitting a button and hearing like the big whoomp or feeling like a big whoomp.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like, I mean, if people want to make an electronics example, it's the changing your environment. It's, you know, if it's an Arduino, you're blinking an LED. If it's a steel plant, you're, you know, starting up steel plant facilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so what about the so, you know, you deal with people doing either crisis work or greenfield work, but like what is percentage? I mean, like how much are people maintaining versus designing new stuff, right? Because you said people are trying to upgrade for efficiencies and stuff like that. Like what is the split?
Most of the stuff I get involved in is incremental upgrades. Every now and again we'll see a capital project where you like tear out, you know, entire control system and put something new in, but for the most part it's incremental upgrades. The big
if you don't mind me asking too,
sure.
is this tied to the nature of your business? Like, because I know you're a rep, but you also like, would they go straight to like a Rockwell or whoever if they were doing like a really big thing, or is that?
Yeah, and actually, something to check out. So there's something called the Rockwell Encompass program, and you know, quick note on Rockwell. The reason I keep mentioning Rockwell is in the U.S. They pretty much own the controls market. So from PLCs, programmable logic controllers, all the way down to push buttons. I mean, Rockwell, they pretty much own the market. There are other players like Siemens, IDEC, Omron, Schneider Group. But I mean, they're all fighting over the last, 15 to 20% of the market. So if I keep referencing Allen Bradley, it's not a personal favorite. It's just the reality of the situation. But either way. So the reason that's important is my rep firm, a while ago, we structured ourselves so that we only sell Encompass partner products. And the Encompass program, it's like Rockwell's third-party vendor program, basically. Yeah, we get brought in. We work with the Rockwell distributor channel, and basically, the customer goes to the distributor and says, "Hey, we want to upgrade our marble making line. We have one of those. We want to upgrade our marble making line."
That's cool. Yeah.
Can you come in and help us? The Rockwell distributor helps spec stuff, and then all the stuff that we sell are like the extra bits and bobs that, like the other stuff that makes it work. So,
right. And then there is a catalog around like what do they need to plug into it, but that's where you come in and you kind of say, well, this has this advantage, that has that advantage, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Do some light duty engineering for them, that type of thing. Yep.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Okay. Yeah. So that means that you are in on greenfield stuff too. So that's an interesting point. I just wanted to make sure that was not indicative of the business types,
Yeah, no. Yep. And, we should mention at some point, I don't know if you're going to get into the more technology side of it, but industrial networks, that's kind of a neat thing that, I don't think,
I think that some of that is just like the upgrade process too, right? Because like you're saying, like at least in my experience, right? I've been at places where the old way that things were done was, there was a control panel, but the only intelligence in that system was an operator, right? It was the meat controller, right? It was the person pushing a button, looking, is it done? Yes, it is. Press the other button, or do the thing, pull the lever, whatever, right? And like that person is expensive and they're harder to find, especially in rural Ohio. So I'm sure that there are upgrades to. It's not always negative. Sometimes it's just I can't find a person. I gotta upgrade.
Well, yeah. I had a guy tell me once. We were talking about upgrading his machine to a networked machine, and he looks at me. He says, "Son," I said, "Yes." He says, 24 volts don't lie on an input. He said, "I don't know about that Ethernet." It's like
you and your fiddly bits and your wavy forms, Yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, I fell in like 4 to 20 controller, 4 to 20 controllers, like that kind of stuff. it goes over long distances. There's a reason that some of this stuff sticks around. I'll just say that. How about that?
Yeah, there is. But if I can gush like a nerd for a minute, one of the really interesting things that's out there right now, these industrial networks that they're part of the application layer. So they're on Ethernet, but and they use some components of TCP IP, but they're also UDP. But they're a totally different application layer. And the best way to describe it is you guys have talked to software people before, like embedded software engineers, or if you listen to embedded.fm, they're always talking about it too. We talk about real-time systems on a small scale. So you have your microprocessor, you design it to be real-time with like a real-time operating system, or whatever.
Right.
The state
reacts
of the
really
art,
quickly to a thing, right?
Exactly, and it's deterministic too. So if thing happens
right,
at
exactly.
time x.1, thing 2 is going to happen at time x.2. Yeah. So one of the neat things in industry is that they've taken that concept of real time operation and made it like when we're talking about real time on a board, we're talking about a couple of centimeters maybe of distance. With the networks now, you can do, I'm not joking, like 2 miles of distance and still have a real-time system. It's insane. And
Wait,
it's
but
all
why would
stuff
you want
that,
to do that though?
Because steel mills are really long.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess there's always safety stuff too, but yeah, that's a really good point. So what, you have like a control room that is the brains of the operation, but then it's sending signals. Why wouldn't you push the control to a local node though?
So you do, and if you look at the hierarchy, and this is where this is the fun stuff of controls engineering at an industrial scale. So you start laying out your control schematic for what are your varying types of real time, right? If you're doing servo motor control, you're going to have a controller that's within, let's say, 10 to 20 meters of whatever your motion point is, but that can be controlled upstream by like DCS is a term that's sometimes used, like distributed control system.
That's what I used to work on, at ABB.
Okay, yeah. So
right.
like a DCS, or even like a big PLC system that is a half mile away in the control room with a capital C. Could be commanding that servo drive, like, hey, I've got slack in the steel web down at a half mile away at one end of the plant. Servo drive on the take up on the other end. You need to start pulling a little bit harder. So I'm going to tell you need to pull harder, but and that needs to be sequenced with what's going on the other end. But locally, that's using its own real-time network to communicate with the servo motor and the other servo drives to make sure that's all coordinated, then reporting back. So
right. So the servo control is actually at the local node, right? It's like saying it's sending the step commands, or not the step commands. It's getting the feedback. It's driving the current and all the stuff through the servo specifically. But you're saying that like a higher abstracted command of like spin, instead of 1,000 RPMs, go 2,000 RPMs. That's kind of the difference, right?
You got it. Yep.
And that's done from the remote thing, but it still needs to be fast enough that it can cover that distance. Is that the idea?
Yeah. And, it's also a heck of a lot cheaper to run a fiber line from the control room than to run a ginormous bundle of cable and have to deal with voltage drop on digital and analog I/O and all that crazy stuff. So a lot of giant cable runs are being replaced.
They used to actually send that in the old days, you're saying?
Oh, yeah, man. Giant conduits. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like we used to do stuff where we would have like a local cabinet. There'd be a controller in there, like it would be, like a PLC effectively, right? A little bit, usually a little bit more beefy, but then that would be controlling the local I/O. Usually if like you had an analog sensor that told you the position of the servo, then it would also be reading it locally and reacting to that, and then pushing it back out locally to the drive circuit, right?
Yep.
But then the central system is actually sending the update commands to say to change that actual control mechanism. That's the whole idea, right?
You got it. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of a microcosm. Maybe we should have started with this, but like the whole idea of like a programmable logic controller is basically that small system by itself, right?
Yep.
It's like just you have a thing, you have an input, you react to that input, you do something as a result of that.
Correct. Yep, and do it in an ordered fashion, real time, if you want to use that term. Whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, real time's relative, right? I mean, like it is, at human scale, the faster than human scale probably, but like, you're not waiting for, your network processing to finish, right? It just does the thing within a certain time span.
That's right. And there are different types of real time too. Like hard real time would be like when you're launching a rocket, you really, really want that to happen not only in order but at a certain time. Whereas if your servo drives off by a couple milliseconds, that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so like you mentioned networking, like. So are you seeing all the different standards that are out there? Because I used to get asked questions about these, but I didn't know what they were. But like, so it feels like some industries kind of have different terms.
Yeah. So the big ones, and this has changed quickly. But I would say the big three are Ethernet IP, and IP is not Internet Protocol. IP is Industrial Protocol. Totally different than like TCP IP. Don't get them confused. Yeah, Ethernet IP.
But they still use Cat5 connectors, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
Cat 5.
Yeah.
Cat 7. Cat 7 now. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just plug it in though, and you think like, oh, it's just gonna do this thing. It's like, oh, not really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and let's hope they use shielded cables. People still nowadays, whatever. You're just lying when you say noise. No, seriously, I'm. Use shielded cables. Yeah.
Right.
So Ethernet IP is usually found in Allen Bradley Rockwell systems. Profinet is what you'll find in Siemens systems. And then kind of the third party, let's call it open source guy. I don't know if that's actually true. They're all technically open source.
Yeah,
but
it feels like it's a lot of closed source in the industry, but yeah.
Yeah, they haven't gotten there yet. But is EtherCAT, which is a very interesting protocol, very neat one.
Yeah. So now that is all in the Ethernet stack, or at least of the networking stack of like plugging different controllers together and kind of tying node to node to node, right? But then I also, what's the one? Modbus? What's Modbus? Like, what level is that at?
Oh, sure. So Modbus would be, so the three that I just mentioned are all Ethernet. So if you looked in a control cabinet, you would see a bunch of Ethernet switches and, Cat 5, 6, 7 cable. It looks like an IT, room. And it all is interchangeable. I mean, there's nothing special about the switches. Like they still use the OSI layer, all that stuff. Modbus is a serial protocol. RS-45. In fact, I think you need to be 45 to use Modbus. Could be wrong about that.
Okay.
But you can also
more
have Modbus
closer to the hardware, kind of like the low level pieces.
Yeah.
I've seen so many of these, like there's always TM at the end. You know what I mean? Like there's all these different industrial protocols that like it gets confusing for me.
Yeah. No, Modbus may be closer to the hardware. I don't know. It's not used that much anymore. I mean, they do have a version now that, of course, can be used over Ethernet. It's called Modbus TCP. Same data structure. They just encapsulate it within Ethernet. But yeah. Yep.
So you see, but people are adding this stuff. I mean, like you're saying on updates and stuff like that, people are networking things together in order to get better efficiencies, better timing, stuff like that.
Oh, big time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's the future of where things are going for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get to your stuff here then. So you run Paul Davis Automation. That's your company and your day job and your moneymaker. But you also do 3ML, right? And this is actually, so John is one of my former students as well. You design electronics and you are basically making your own industrial electronics. I was very impressed when you came to me because I was like, a salesperson who builds products. While that's a crazy amount of time to do stuff, the fact that you literally know what people need and like that felt magical. So tell us about that.
There's so much magic, Chris. It's just, let me tell you.
Yeah, just magic all over the place.
Right? It's magic all over. Yeah. No. So, owning a business, I'm always looking for ways to make the business more businessy. Is that technical?
More money. You just say
more money. There we
go.
Yeah,
you like money.
Yeah. Employees want paid. It's a really weird thing. Who knows? But one of the quick note for any engineers out there who are looking to go to the dark side of sales. One of the cool things about it is that you get to see everything. Not only do I see different companies, I get to see everybody's problems. I get to see how they're similar. I get to see how they're different. I get to see what other companies are doing, how they do things. I mean, it's really cool because there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences too.
If you don't want to make the sale, you can tell them they're idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why are you doing that, man? You're dumb.
You morons. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So So the point behind 3ML was to capitalize on that and say, all right, if I can, if I can find some problems, it in this industry and in industry in general, it doesn't. I mean, you don't. One of the nice things is you don't have to manufacture, 1 million of something to make a viable business. I'm not kidding when you can say you can manufacture 10,000 of something a year, or even maybe 5,000, maybe 100 of something.
You should tell me. You should talk about this too, because you've told me about this. The people who do that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is such a clear line between value and problem solving. In this business. I mean, it's not like, to pick on IoT a little bit. It's like, oh, look, it's another internet connected light switch, which doesn't add much value to begin with, potentially, right? With this, it's like, hey, I'm giving you a product, or I'm designing you a product that can save time. I mean, it's real dollars, right?
You just do it in percentages, right? You say, I'm going to save you $50 million next year. This costs $5 million. If you don't do this, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You don't have to say that, of course, but like that's the implication, right?
Well, I mean, you can put it on a chart and make them, or let them come to their own conclusions about that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it is not. I mean, there are companies out there I know who make products, electronic products, where the bill of material cost is probably, let's say $500. Well, no, bill of material is probably less than that, and add in labor and all that, and it's probably
sure. Yeah, the COGS, cost of goods sold, right?
Yep, and it's probably $500-$600, right? And they're selling it for $2,500 to $3,000, if not more. And at first
margins,
man. Well, you might be saying like, oh, they're raking their customers over the coals, but no, I like the problems that they solve and then the support that they offer. I mean, it is so much better than selling something that costs $1.
Well,
so much
yeah,
better.
I mean, there's that, but that's on a personal basis too. I think the way that I always look at it is like, what's the alternative for that company, right? That company is willing to pay $3,000 per whatever, right? And you might say, oh, someone might say like, oh, well, that's not right to do that. You should just mark up the BOM. Whatever. However, what is their alternative? Like they hire someone, that person then goes and designs a solution, whatever. If there is a solution that was cheaper, they would obviously go to something cheaper, right? It's like just a market thing, I think, personally. So,
oh yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the pitfalls that engineers who start companies fall into. I've seen it firsthand, and I've done it too with some of the 3ML products. You go, okay, yeah, I'm just going to mark up that BOM, and you find yourself not making any money after 12 months, and you're going, why?
Well, especially because it's like a very specified solution, right? If it's the more niche it is, the fewer customers there are too, and so you got to spend more time on something that you can't sell for much, right?
Exactly, that's right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So mark up your product, people. It's not a bad profit is not a four-letter word.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, I think it's, and it enables you to, well, we don't need to debate the merits of charging more for your business. Okay. So what did you decide to build for your?
So the first thing was an industrial interface for the Raspberry Pi, which there's actually a few out there, which is kind of cool, at some very large companies doing data collection. And that's what most of these products do. Most of the products that we make are involved in industrial data collection in one form or another. So yeah, there was the industrial Raspberry Pi. It's not really a hat. It's more like a module, let's call it. And then
it's got more connectors and stuff like that.
yeah, exactly. And then an Arduino board, I guess, that basically turns an Arduino into a very dense data collection node, if you will, meant to communicate back to like a master, for example.
Cool. Well, that's great. And I think when you told me about this too, you had said that there's more people that are like either on the factory floor just looking to get data out, right? They don't want to necessarily buy a full-scale, industrial system. They just need to do that one thing. So that seemed like one of the use cases. But the other one was just people that are already comfortable in this kind of more makery type solutions that are fine for the job, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's big. All the big players have their data collection systems for analytics, and the big buzzword there is Industry 4.0.
I'd love to hear. No, I don't want to hear about the 1.2, 1.3, 2.3, whatever.
Yeah, but a lot of people. My big hypothesis in doing this was that when I look at university programs now, or even like tech school programs, a lot of those people are using single board computers. Doesn't have to be a Raspberry Pi to do experiments. I mean, I've sold a couple to universities where they're doing sampling programs, motion control labs, that type of thing. Eventually, there's going to be some crossover from that into the industrial world. These are never going to replace a PLC from Siemens or Allen Bradley. They're not intended to. But
right, you're not willing to support them to that level either, I'm sure. Right.
Yeah, and it also looks really bad when the machine is smoking and you like destroyed a car or something,
Right,
and
right.
You say, well, that Raspberry Pi I put in there, we
Right.
saved like $500.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah,
That's like the opposite of paying for a solution, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if you know a little bit of Python, and you know a little bit of HTML and CSS, you can make a pretty neat system for quickly and for not that much money either.
Right, and it also allows you to not just plug an industrial output into your Raspberry Pi, which is something people should never do. If you don't know that already, you're welcome.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Yeah, but people, I mean, like people do that. They're like, oh, it's just an I/O, so it's just an I/O. It's like, don't do that.
No, yeah.
Right. It's just an I/O, but it's also 24. What was that guy saying? 24 volts.
24 volts. Yep.
Yeah.
24 volts that can.
You just know
pump
it's
at
happening.
least-
Yeah.
You just know it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not on until it's at 24 volts and 750 milliamps. Then it's on, son.
Right.
Yeah. Huh.
You ain't wrong. You ain't wrong.
Yeah, wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we also talked about before the show of, so obviously IoT is a swear word, but in the industrial world, it's a solution looking for a problem, right? But in the industrial world, it feels like an actual problem, right? I mean, are you seeing this on a daily to day basis or what?
Yeah, I would say one of in 10 years, if IoT actually still exists, it'll be an industry. I mean, because it's just such a, what is IoT? IoT is giving somebody data or access to a system that is not hard or that is hard to get to or not nearby, right? And there are plenty of those in an industrial environment. Like, I really don't want to climb up on top of that tower when it's like, -10 up there with
Right.
50-mile-an-hour wind and it's snowing. I really don't want to do that. So if I can stick a sensor up there and have it, talk over whatever back to a system, and I can remotely troubleshoot it, collect data, whatever, that's awesome. Like
Right.
that's a huge win.
Right. And I think the other thing being that there's an actual, like, a line you can draw back from having a sensor there. You're not just putting a sensor there to have a sensor there, right? It's you have a sensor there that enables you to save energy on your process. You can go faster. You can, monitor downtime, like you talked about. Like, there's all of these things where at the end of the day, the end result is saving money. Like, when you save money for someone, there's value. Like, that literally is value, right? It's like, and
Oh, yeah.
and that's really the things that I've seen as well that are like those are the actual business cases for an industrial IoT type thing.
Well, yeah, the stakes are so high too. Like we do a lot. We have an IoT device that we sell that is in the medium voltage switchgear market, and
You have to explain what that is, though, too, because that term always trips me out. I'm like, medium, really?
Yeah, medium. Yeah, so medium was it technically start at like 1.5 kV and goes up to like what is it, 6 kV or something, like a 4 kV?
Something
I think.
like that. I don't know. I just know that low voltage is like much higher than I ever thought it was going to be.
Oh man, yeah, I was in a trend. Like, this should tell you how big it was. I was in a rectifier bridge, like like it was a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
It was off,
that
right?
had a door on it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was off. But that's of course I work with rectifiers and the stuff I work on, but like it's a chip, right? And when I'm looking at this thing, the diodes are like the size of my head, and it's like
trash cans, right?
Like yeah, and that's the bus bar, and there's your bridge. Like it looks like a schematic. It's just huge. But anyways, so for that stuff, the IoT device monitors bus bar temperature when, which, okay, you're like, why would you want to monitor bus bar temperature? Well, a lot of this stuff feeds gigantic motors that are doing big operations. And, one of the fun things of working in industry is like when that motor kicks on, I mean, you know from school that current is like an electromotive force, right? Like you know that? Yeah. you actually know it when you see like bus bar rattle because the amount of current that's flowing through it from like the inrush current of a motor. Yeah, that's big, right? So,
well, yeah, and it's, it creates magnetic fields, and then that interacts with other fields, and yada yada yada. Yeah.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. So, why do you monitor bus bar temperature? Well, when things rattle, connections come loose. It starts creating micro-arcing situations, and if you think of all of the energy that's in there, if something like arcs to or goes to ground, that's a problem. That's tens of thousands of amps going to ground, and it's going to break something, right? So, anyways, that's an IoT situation.
Well,
you want to monitor
grounded?
that.
I mean, that's the real question, right?
Yeah,
but probably
exactly.
your power supply is not going to be happy wherever the hell that is, right? And like,
More like your power plant. There was
wow.
Yeah, one of the companies we were talking to, they do aluminum smelting, and
those guys.
yeah, their electricity bill per month was $7 million a month. But they had a situation. They had some special monitoring on their input to the plant. But either way, at the substation, if they went to ground and they shorted, like if one of the big motors went to ground, they could actually shut down. I won't say where it is because it'll give it away. Because there's only like 7 of these places in the U.S., but it would like shut down half of that state's electrical grid because they would have to kill the. Yeah, it's insane. It's just insane.
You basically start to overtax the generators, right? Because it's probably generated with steam and the like all that stuff. It's all tied back somewhere.
Yeah, man, it trips the breaker. Yeah, the really big breaker. Yeah.
Man, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, it's too bad you're not allowed to like I would follow a Twitter account just of all the crazy shit you've seen. Like, it's like, and that's the fun thing about industrial, really, too, is that like there's just weird stuff out there. Like, I don't know. If you can sneak pictures, you should totally start a Twitter account doing that.
That'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it?
It would. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you follow Machine Pics.
No, I should.
So that's Kane. I think he's public about that. I hope he's public. He's public now. But he's he works with Avidan at Root Ventures, and he has this great Twitter account, and like he posts these amazing like slow-mo shots of like industrial processes, and they're always mesmerizing, and highly recommend following that Twitter account. So like something like that, except it doesn't have to be moving necessarily.
Yeah. Yep. So before we have to wind up, I do want to go back to sales a little bit, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. That's a good wrap-up technique.
Yep. So engineers out there,
is this the pitch? Oh, this is the pitch.
Oh, this is the pitch. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Yeah.
Coffee is for closers, Chris. Put down the coffee.
That's right. I can be a closer.
Nobody
Come on,
probably
man.
knows.
I come from a long line of salespeople. I know what you're talking about, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So if you're one of the things I can't stress enough is vendor relationships. So I've heard people talk about this before, and I think they undervalue it, or maybe like okay.
Are you saying from the engineering level or at the sales level?
From an engineering level. Okay. So as an engineer, and I've thought this too, it's like if you're thinking what is the purpose of a salesperson in the age of Amazon, which is a valid question, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Especially if you're going out on your own, you're starting a business and you're trying to get things rolling and all that. Make sure, find a good salesperson, make sure that whatever vendor you choose, you get good support through their sales team, and then lean on that person like crazy, because typically or oftentimes they're the gatekeeper when it comes to getting credit with a company. If there's a lead time issue, if you know your salesperson well, you can lean on them, and they might be able to get you bumped up in the queue to get you better lead time. There's 1,000 small things that person can help you out with.
I agree with all this
stuff. It's
actually,
worthwhile keeping those relationships going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And and I think there's always the soft benefits too. Like I know this is not what you're talking about, but like I found one of my jobs through a salesperson too. It was just like the human component still is really necessary, I think. And like honestly, they were always keeping an eye out for me too, right? Like the one sales guy that I had in Cleveland was fantastic. He doesn't listen to the show, unfortunately, but he was always really great. He was literally keeping an eye out. It wasn't necessarily from a sales perspective. It wasn't like I want to sell another thing. It was like he knew what I was working on. He just kind of pinged me real soft, and like that that is a good salesperson, right? That is someone who's just got your best interest in mind. And they're, I'm going to go there when I do have a real problem and be like, hey, like you helped me last time, please help me again. Like it's just basically that track record of helpfulness.
Yeah. And if your salesperson seems like a shyster, they're not a good salesperson. Like the best ones are, they're almost, it's like a peer, right? It's like, hey, Chris, I've got this problem. It's like asynchronous engineering. If they're really good and they're a fantastic resource,
like
you
a
can
daemon,
say, man,
right?
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Yeah.
How's that programming go for you, Chris?
It's not that. I've been reading that book. I read that book, Daemon. I'll put a link in the comments and I'll tell you about it after the show. But it's so good.
Was that a Stevenson book?
It's not Neil. No, it's not Neil Stevenson. It is. Oh God, it's the people that do that's based. The DC Darknet is based on it. I probably mentioned it on here before, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you have to read it. It's so good. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah. A good salesperson can be like a daemon for a lot of that stuff, and use them. That's what they're there for. Make them earn their commission. Come on.
I think so too, and I think you'll be able to tell too. Like I've had a wide range of people that have interfaced with me. I think the key thing actually that you and I haven't mentioned yet is that the some of it's going to depend on how much you can provide. Right. I got much better service when I was at ABB than other places, just because like there was a ton of money behind it, right? And like so that is kind of a caveat. I'm sure that your customers are probably bigger than small, right?
Yeah, but it's not like every customer is $1 million customer. I mean, there's there are some that I just like them as people, so I try to help them out.
Yeah, and that helps too.
There are others that are I mean, I don't know I think we're it may make that gets flipped on its head as if you're a startup. I mean, if you have a good product and you're, if you have like your TI rep calling on you or whatever, for instance, right? And you can convince them that your product is really great. I mean, they're going to go to bat for you and get you samples and get you, whatever, right? That's a common type.
Yeah, exactly. And usually it's for storytelling as well. It's like, oh, well, we helped start up ABC and look what they did with it, right? That they like that stuff too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my controversial statement will be: there is no such thing as an engineering company. All companies are sales companies. Okay.
We'll debate that in person sometime.
Well, hey, you got to sell it, right? I have a tally of how many people have told me their product will sell itself.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, all right. Well,
yeah.
I don't agree with anyone who says that either. That has worked in history, but it is not. It is the exception, not the rule. So yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. All right. I might lean closer to you than away from. What about so like I thought you were gonna, when I said this is the time for pitching, I thought you were gonna try and pitch people for going into sales. Is that?
Oh, I mean, so.
is that a no?
No, it's okay. So. Sales is actually prior to the podcast, I was writing stuff down like, I have to make sure to mention this, or I want to make sure that I flesh this out. That was one of the things, right? Like, what do I say if Chris asked me this question? Chances are that it won't be any less stressful. Say you're an engineer right now, you're a design engineer, okay, and you're personable. You had, I don't know, maybe you got your review, and they're like, hey, you should go into sales, and you're like, I'm that bad of an engineer? Crap.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They might just be saying that you know how to talk to people. So yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So should you take that job and go into sales? I think it depends on what you're looking for. There are, if you weigh the pros and cons. All the benefits I listed before. You get to see a lot of things. You get to keep a pulse on the on whatever industry you're in. If you ever are looking for a job, being in sales is the best position you can be in, because it gives you literally exposure to everybody.
Right.
Oh yeah. You'll never have a problem finding work, assuming you're good at what
and also,
you do.
if you're looking for work right now and you know some salespeople, you might know who to ask for a tip or two.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It probably won't be lower stress. It's going to be a different type of stress. Like, as engineers, we're beholden to things like, deadlines and bill of material cost and all the stuff that goes along with product development. As salespeople, it's like, hey man, I don't care if the economy dipped 5%.
Right. You have goals. Right.
Yeah, you have goals, buddy. And if you want to get paid, you got to meet those goals, right? So, but there's also a cleanliness in that too. It's like, okay, like you're never wondering what your job expectations are. Here's your budget. That's what we call our sales goals. Here's your sales goal, your budget. That's really all that matters.
Yeah.
How are you doing with that, right? There is no equivocation about, well, you did like your review process is okay. You're supposed to sell
Here's your
$1 million.
number.
You sold,
You're above it or
yeah.
below it, and yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing too is that the trade-off for that stress though is the earning potential can't be higher. Depends on what sales you go into and all that. But there's more travel, so I don't know.
Okay. I would actually. The thing that I think is interesting that you might be an outlier for is like if I was ever going to go into it, it would probably be because of just an interesting situation, right? But the thing that would frighten me and might frighten some of our listeners is, well, what about the tech stuff? It seems like I got an engineering because I like solving problems, and I know that sales solves problems in that scenario, but it's like it feels like the tech stuff is just non-existent. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I would say that's well, okay. It depends if you're selling toilet paper.
What other problems? Then? That's a shitty job.
Yeah, I can't help you there, buddy.
Womp womp.
That's womp womp. Yeah. If you, I do so. Let me put it this way. When I started with the company, I was definitely not doing any engineering, period. Now I spend a significant time of my time doing that. And the people that I employ, I hire engineers who have potential salespeople and make them into salespeople. And they're also doing engineering too. It all depends on what you're doing. And if you go out looking for tech stuff, I mean, if I look at when I first started getting interested in making sure that I knew as much or more than my customers that could actually do their jobs to a certain degree.
Yeah.
There is a direct connection between the company revenue growing and me changing focus. And the more that I learn and know, like the more money we make. So I mean,
That's interesting.
It's I mean, it makes as an engineer Chris. Who would you rather talk to? The sales guy who can sit down and look over a schematic with you and go, oh, have you thought of this? Or, maybe we can use this other product here because this weird characteristic, like you can do that. Or the guy who is like, well, let me get back to you on that.
Right, exactly. Right. And and like having someone well networked within their own company, depending on, the vendor type, whatever, like having someone well networked and organized, that helps. But at a certain point, what they're going to run into is like, well, I can't give you a bigger price break because you're only this, X big of a company, and I can't, obviously can't help you with your individual problems. So it's like, well, what is that person's value versus like what you're saying? Most of the time, as long as they're organized, I'll take the technical competent person, as long as they're not like, there's always overstepping potentially, but like the best ones know how to navigate that, I think.
Yeah. Well, and kind of tongue in cheek, we do the best kind of engineering in sales because I I get you up to the solution, and then the actual hard part, the implementation.
Right,
I'm like, hey man, I'll see you later, dude.
Right,
you do that.
right,
yeah, I got you there. Here.
2 a.m. install?
Oh
yeah, I definitely I feel for you, man.
Yeah, that's horrible. Let me know how it goes.
I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah. See you in the morning. So it's the best engineering. It's all the fun without any of the like struggle or horribleness.
Nice,
So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, like, and I guess I didn't really think about it from that perspective. I guess I always think of like there's sales, and I guess this is another like kind of the terminology too, right? There's field applications engineers, there's sales engineers, there's salespeople, and like in that 3-person spectrum I just explained, like usually the ones at the far left are the ones that I like hanging out with because they're the ones who see all the most technical problems and are solving the problems versus just like checking quotas and making sure POs are made and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, so I guess to go back to my endorsement, because I sounded really horrible about that. Everybody should look at going into sales, unless you just really if it's not your personality type or whatever. I think it's not. It's probably not what most people think it is, especially if you're newer into the workplace or whatever. But it can be exceptionally rewarding and really fun and very flexible. But it's also surprisingly, probably one of the hardest careers out there, because it's hard. There's no spec for how to be a good salesperson.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, it just it's tough.
That sounds right. Yeah. I mean, like sometimes it's like design this widget and then you're like, all right, I'm gonna go design this widget. But how to make a sale? Like, I don't know. Like you got to talk to a shitload of people and like it's like it sounds like a very open-ended task versus a very closed-ended task, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, John, thank you for doing this. Thank you for introducing us to past guests as well. You were the one who introduced us to Jerry Roston as well.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I'm sure that we'll call you back when we get sales questions, like maybe we'll get a lot of interest and people are like, oh, we got to hear more about sales.
Yeah.
Probably not, but
you'll probably see all your listeners drop off after this. They'll be like, Chris jumped the shark. Like,
I wouldn't have asked you on if I didn't think like you're interested in electronics, you're in the industrial space, so +2 right there. Like we haven't talked to any salespeople, so I think this is good. This is a good look at that, and I think you're doing it right.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And, I'll throw out there to everybody too, if you're interested in learning more about sales or just, I don't know, want to pick my brain on whatever, I mean, please reach out. I love talking to people. There's been a number of people that I have mentored over to the dark side.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Darth Vader in here.
But yeah. Or if you're starting a company or whatever, I mean, that's the fun part. Getting to see what people are doing and trying to help them out. So yeah.
Cool. All right, John. Thanks for that. Where can people find you online?
Okay. So on the
Twitters?
Twitter, you can. That's probably the best way to get me. It's John PR Davis. Very original. I know.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. We'll post all the links here as well. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
See ya.
I don't know, man. You think people will find that interesting?
I guarantee it. Like seriously, I think
Really?
that'll be if they don't turn it off at the beginning because you said sales, then I think it'll be good.
I should have put on my pitch voice.